Welcome back to Bayou Shadows, Justice Deferred. I'm your host, Charlene Nadeau. So in episode 2, we established that the procedure collapsed, the missing reports, and ignored evidence. And that is what crippled the investigations into Loretta Chasson-Lewis and Ernestine Patterson. The initial negligence we talked about was a signal to the criminal element. We will not hold you accountable. Today we go further. We'll prove that the failure in Jefferson Davis Parish was not an accident. It was a deliberate institutional custom. So this is going to be the episode where the police department crosses the line from passive failure to active sabotage, transforming this tragedy into a constitutional crime. We're focusing on victims 3 and 4, Kristen Gary Lopez and Whitney Dubois, whose murders became linked to the highest levels of police corruption. March 18, 2007, the body of Kristen Gary Lopez, age 21, was found in a canal. A gruesome echo of the initial discoveries of the other women. Kristen was a young mother and a cousin to one of the future victims, and a member of this tight-knit, high-risk, as he said, Sheriff Ricky Edwards' high-risk community that the police force itself was actively utilizing as confidential informants. So Kristen's murder should have been the moment that the investigative team mobilized. Instead, it became the moment that the official investigation was corrupted by its own lead officer. The crucial lead was simple. It was a pickup truck that multiple witnesses placed with Kristen around the time of her disappearance, and which they alleged was used to transport her body into the canal. This vehicle was the single greatest source of potential physical evidence. DNA, hair, fiber, etc., that could link a killer to the crime scene. The lead investigator, Chief Criminal Investigator Warren Gary, knew the importance of that truck. He also knew its value. Gary committed the unthinkable. He used his authority to negotiate and purchase that critical evidence vehicle from an inmate in parish custody, a man who was either a suspect or a key witness in the case. He then immediately washed the truck and resold it for a profit. In one single stunning transaction, the lead investigator on a capital murder case guaranteed that the only piece of physical evidence that could have yielded a conviction was permanently destroyed. It was a calculated, deliberate act of evidence tampering. This is not hearsay. This is not my opinion. This is a verifiable fact documented by the state of Louisiana. In June 2008, the Louisiana Board of Ethics formally ruled that Warren Gary violated state ethics law by purchasing that evidence vehicle from a person in custody and selling it for personal gain, and he was fined $10,000. The fine confirmed the crime, but the institutional response confirmed the corruption. The constitutional custom of impunity. This is the central argument of my podcast, Bayou Shadows, Justice Deferred. This case is about more than individual corruption. It's about an institutional liability. We use the Monell Doctrine, the federal legal principle that holds government entities accountable when a constitutional violation, like the denial of due process or equal protection, is caused not by one rogue officer, but by an official policy or custom of the municipality. The system's reaction to Warren Gary's crime is the custom itself. In the wake of this proven ethical violation and the destruction of evidence in a capital murder case, the sheriff's office did not fire Warren Gary. They did not demote him. What did they do? Promoted him to the rank of commander of the evidence room. let's let that sink in for a minute, people. The man who destroyed the key physical evidence in a capital murder case was put in charge of securing all evidence for all outstanding cases, including the rest of Jefferson Davis 8, Jennings 8. The institution effectively ratified the misconduct. Unbelievable. This act of promotion is the constitutional evidence of a custom of impunity. It establishes an unwritten rule that evidence tampering in these cases will not only be tolerated, but it'll be rewarded. This custom, we argue, violated the constitutional rights of Kristen Gary Lopez and every woman who followed by ensuring the system's design to protect them was actively shielding the killer. And we have Whitney Dubois. The fallout from this custom was immediate and devastating. Less than 2 months after Kristen Lopez's death, the body of our fourth victim, Whitney Dubois, 26 years old, was found. Whitney's case directly connects to the primary person of interest, Frankie Richard. Richard admitted to seeing both Whitney and Kristen shortly before their deaths. He was arrested for Kristen's murder, but released due to lack of evidence. Why? The evidence Warren Gary had just ensured was destroyed. But investigators had one other piece of leverage: drug charges. They had some major drug charges against Frankie. Here we have Detective Paula Guillory, a key member of the official task force that was put together to find the killer of these women. She was fired for stealing money and drugs from that very same evidence room that Gary was promoted to command. Crucially, the missing evidence she was accused of taking, where did it come from? None the other than from the drug case against Frankie Richard. The actions of Gary and Guillory, two high-ranking officers, guaranteed that Frankie Richard, the primary persons of interest in these murders, could not be prosecuted or leveraged on any outstanding charge. They effectively created an investigative vacuum that shielded him from any accountability. The institutional failure was no longer a matter of passive neglect. It was a dual, prolonged act of sabotage that protected the criminal element at the expense of justice. It's just outright cannot wrap my brain around that. I don't even understand how our state or any law officer, prosecutor, district attorney, mayor, governor, anybody above these people could sit back and watch this happen and never, not once, step in and do anything about it. I just cannot wrap my brain around it. I do not come from that kind of state. I just cannot believe that we live in this time where we sit back and watch because somebody branded them high risk because they had an addiction to drugs and they all hung out in the same crowds, and so freaking what? They were people that you are put into office to protect and serve. If you don't want to do that to everyone as a whole and treat everyone equally, then find another job. Oh, it ticks me off to no end. So then we have this, we're going to call this little segment, The Cost of Speaking the Truth. Sergeant Jesse Ewing. The final piece of evidence proving a cover-up comes from the fate of one officer who tried to stop it. Sergeant Jesse Ewing. Ewing was a detective with the Jennings Police Department, and he was doing his job when he took statements from two separate inmates. Those inmates alleged that the suspects were working directly with the sheriff's office to dispose of the evidence. The evidence being the very truck Warren Gary purchased in the Kristen Lopez's case. Ewing brought these specific explosive allegations of corruption to his superiors. His reward for reporting potential evidence tampering in the capital murder case? Forced out of his job soon afterward. This is the ultimate proof of institutional custom. The institution's pattern is clear. Destroy evidence, you are promoted. Steal evidence that protects the suspect, you compromise the case. Report the corruption, you are silenced and forced out of this institution. This is why over 15 years later, the women of I call deferred justice have zero convictions. The system stopped investigating the murders and began protecting itself and its compromised personnel. The evidence presented, in my opinion, that I just went over, little old me, a nobody, just a little bit of law school, little business law at that. The documented ethics violation, the rewarded destruction of evidence, the shielding of a primary suspect, and the retaliation against an honest officer is the full constitutional brief against the Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office. This is not a case for local law enforcement. It demands the highest level of accountability. In my opinion, I am calling for an external federal entity like the United States Department of Justice. I'm going to say this again. The DOJ to initiate a dedicated cold case review focusing specifically on the evidence obstruction and the alleged role of law enforcement officials. The promotion of Warren Gary, the theft of evidence by Paul Guillory, and the firing of Sergeant Ewing are all actions that align with a systematic environment of institutional protection. This failure is a direct violation of the equal protection rights of those 8 women. It's a tragedy that these 8 women that were not only murdered by a predator, they were failed, then betrayed by the institution sworn to protect them. And that is the constitutional crime that we must solve. You solved that crime, and you got the murderers right there. Maybe not all of them, but the ones that are responsible for delivering justice has nonetheless damned any kind of justice for these women from the get-go. I cannot wrap my brain around it. I'll say it again. The tragedy of the Jefferson Davis 8 women that were murdered. They were not only murdered by a predator, they were failed, then betrayed by the institution sworn to protect them. And that, my friends, is the constitutional crime we must solve. We're going to take a break and we're going to come back and we're going to have one of the best people, the most honest people that has done so much for this case, for these women. He has worked his high